Hi guys, I woke up today and I wanted to share with you some of my writing. This piece I'm going to share today is called A Dream Deeply Rooted in the Malawian Dream. You can check out all my blog posts on www.phallysformalawi.wordpress.com and leave me your comments, your feedback, and I'll be very happy to hear from you. So this is a tribute to Martin Luther King, and it's actually a transposition of his I Have a Dream speech. So I hope you like it. I'll be reading from below. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration of the proclamation of poverty eradication in our nation of Malawi. 21 years ago, the great Republic of Malawi, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, held its first multi-party elections. Democracy was the light at the end of the tunnel that was to bring hope, prosperity, and justice to Malawian people who had prior been subject to the dire restraints of colonialism, only to come out and be subject to what has been called the brinks of a dictatorship. Democracy was the new hope. But 21 years after democracy and 51 years since independence, Malawi is still not a burgeoning state. 51 years later, the Malawian nation is still not lucrative in its production, but rather crippled by the manacles of poverty and bound by the severe chains of corruption. 51 years later, the Malawian lives at the footstool of poverty in a world dominated by progression and light as the world's poorest economy. 51 years later, the Malawian is still languished in the corners of the world society and finds herself also in exile. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful position. When the architects of our great nation wrote our magnificent words of constitution, they were also signing a promissory note to which every Malawian was to full heir. This note was embedded in the promise that the state shall actively promote the welfare and development of the people of Malawi by progressively adopting and implementing policies and legislation. The note was one that was to provide adequate resources to the education sector of Malawi and was to provide programs that would eliminate illiteracy in the country. The note was one that was to achieve a sensible balance between the creation and distribution of wealth through nurturing a market economy and long-term investment in health, education, and social development. This note was one that was to promote law and order and respect for society through civic education by honest practices in government, adequate resourcing, and the humane application and enforcement of laws and policing standards. It is obvious today that Malawi has defaulted from this promissory note insofar as its citizens are concerned. Instead of honoring and rearing up this sacred obligation, Malawi has given its citizens a bad check, defaulted, one that has also come back marked insufficient funds. But I refuse to believe that the Bank of Economic Development, Societal Progression and Justice is bankrupt. I refuse to believe that there is insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity for this nation, and so I've come to cash this check. A check that will give us upon demand the riches of sustainability, poverty eradication, and security. The riches of sustainability, poverty eradication, and the security of economic development, growth, and progress. I have also come to this hallowed spot to remind Malawi of the fierce urgency of now. This is not time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of mediocrity and gradualism. Now is the time to uproot the real promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of poverty, the sunlit path of social and economic growth and development. Now is the time. But there is something I must say to my people who wish to stand in the warm threshold which leads into the palace of individual advancement and economic progression. In the process of gaining what we truly require as a people, as the great nation of Malawi, we must not forget that the beginning of change and prosperity begins with us as individuals. We must upheave the mental barriers that contour our actions, in that we have no personal role to play in our poverty, because we do. We must not seek to satisfy our quest for wealth and prosperity by drinking from the cup of fraudulence and dishonesty. We must forever conduct our protest and not allow it to degenerate into lethargy and idleness. Again and again we must rise to the majestic height that comes with accepting mediocrity and fight it with a constant battle that reinforces renowned excellence and world superiority. And given these things, and so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in what I believe should be the Malawian dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up to live out the true meaning of its creed. Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day the Malawian nation will be known for the immense beauty and riches it possesses in its vast industries that could exist in its mountains, valleys, rivers, and lakes. I have a dream that Malawi's education system will be one that acts as a segue and a gate, unleashing the untold stories of potential and innovation that lie dormant in its boys and girls. I have a dream that the Malawian people will be a people of action and initiative, not laying asleep on the aberrant bed of dependency and foreign aid, but reacting, enterprising, moving, and aspiring. I have a dream that Malawi will no longer be known as the poorest economy in the world, but be known among the world's masses as a little nation that took drastic action plan for change when it realized enough was enough. I have a dream that poverty reduction, the provision of basic needs, should not be the sole aim of development structures in our nation, but that we shall strive beyond that, empowered, that different individuals can progress even further in different ways, encouraging and moving our economy and people to new heights. I have a dream today. This is my hope, development, and this is the faith I go to sleep with every day at night. With this faith, I hope to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, I hope to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of hope and new thoughts. With this faith, I hope to elicit people to work together, to pray together, to fight together, and to essentially develop together. And when we have finally broken the clamant jaws of poverty, and we have been released from the ominous gloom of corruption, and we are finally swimming in the fine waves of economic prosperity and evolution, you shall hear my booming cry. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.